Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, everyone. So I know that people are from different locations of the world, so it's better to wish every timing of the day. All right, great. So we have some great ladies with us. Those are doing pretty great in their own fields in the legal industry. Uh, I would introduce all of them one by one. So let's just start with Daja. Daja has 10 plus years of dispute practice encompassing among major there's finance and related litigation, complex commercial litigation, as well as arbitration, often in cross-border conflicts. From an industry perspective, she has wide-ranging expertise covering finance, insurance, healthcare, life science, real estate, entertainment, and media. Daja is part of the firm's global environmental, social, and governance ESG practice. She is an expert in litigation strategy and collaborates extensively with experts of related practice areas. She routinely advises a wider range of companies operating in the green energy sector. Daja is also the Munich chair of Reed Smith's Women Initiative Network and supports initiatives around diversity, social, and inclusion. So we will definitely get to know a lot from Daja because she's also from the Women's Initiative Network. Nevertheless, let's introduce all of our panelists and then we'll move to discuss with them. So another lady we have is Samar. She's the partner with Spencer West, and she practices immigration law. So businesses can access talented individuals, can live and work where they want to. Sumar's many years of experience include responsibility for immigration knowledge for an international firm in the city. Her expertise in this notoriously complex and changing field is therefore detailed and practical. Samar assists companies in setting up in the UK and with sponsoring skilled workers. She has a strong track record of helping companies ensure compliance with sponsorship and right to work requirements. Samar is a thought leader who engages with policymakers and stakeholders on immigration issues. She regularly speaks and writes on immigration and future of work topics, and she's an expert trainer. Now, our last but not the least, advocate Galily-Perel is an intellectual property law advisor. She's from Israel. She advises in the field of patents, trademark, designs, copyright, and commercial secrets in Israel and abroad. Advocate Galily-Perel advises on commercial and litigation aspects of intellectual property rights protection, including procedures with the Israeli Patent Office and foreign patent offices around the world, as well as drafting IP agreements. Advocate Galily-Perel also specializes in the legal aspects of internet law and privacy. Advocate Galily-Perel lectures on a regular basis in various colleges and organizations in Israel about the different aspects of IP. She's a columnist for the Israeli newspaper and magazine, The Marker, and writes frequently in the field of IP. So this discussion is going to be pretty interesting, and we'll get to know about a lot of insights of what women actually do in the legal practices. So let's just start with Liat, Galily-Perel, and then we try to understand, how does it look like to be in the legal industry, and how do you manage your work and life?
Hi, hello everybody. Thank you for having me today, and happy Women's Day. Hopefully a lot of women will see this later on also. And since being a woman in the legal field for over a decade with 3 children, and a husband which is also a lawyer and works a lot of hours, have some experience in managing and balancing work and family life. So I'd like to share a few tips with you about how it helped me to manage this. So the first thing I think is to get rid of the guilt. I think that once we have children, the guilt comes along with it. So everything you do, you feel guilty about. And women tend to be very harsh with themselves and demand from themselves a lot more than they demand from others. So the first thing is really to get rid of the guilt. I think nowadays men also take more part of raising children, but in many cases it still falls on the women. So it's up to us to think of creative ways to manage this balance between work and family. So I think one of the ways to get rid of the guilt is knowing that our children look up to us to give a good example of how to manage life and work, in the hours that we have during the day. I think most of our children, if you ask them, they'd rather have 1 hour with a satisfied and happy mom than 5 hours with a depressed and sad mom. So it's not about the hours, it's more about what you do with them once you have them. I can say that when I learned for my master's degree, I used to learn very hard and I felt so guilty for not being with my kids. And then one day my daughter, which was 12 years old, she came to me and said, "Mom, you're studying so hard. That is so inspiring. I'm gonna go do my homework now because I wanna be successful too." So that's when I realized it's not all about the hours. It's how we give them the example of working hard and being successful. So make every minute count. Another great story I can tell, I've known a businessman who was hardly with his kids. He was never home, only during the weekends. And the mom was always home. And then every weekend he would take one of his children for quality time on a weekend, just him and that kid. And when they grew up, they remembered that, they appreciated it. And it was a great experience. They felt like their father was with them the whole childhood. So that's another great example. Another very important tip is phone aside, laptop aside, tablet aside. When you're with your children, schedule a meeting in the calendar. That's children time, family time, husband, children, phone aside. Get your secretary to get the calls, only urgent things. Look into their eyes, listen to them when they speak, respect them. Like one of my children, when she was 11 years old, she talked to me and said, "Mom, when you're home and you're with your laptop, you're not here, you're not with us, you don't see us." So children are very creative. We can talk to them about these things. And then one day she came to me and said, "You know what, Mom? For 1 hour, I will babysit my little brother. You can go into the room and work 1 hour. We will not bother you. But after that, you're 1 hour with us. No laptops." And we made a deal. And that's the way it was. So talk to them, respect them. And I think that would really work. It's all about expectations at the end of the day, And one last thing that I would like to say is that sometimes when we schedule meetings with men and we can't schedule a meeting because it's the afternoon, it's our children time, we feel uncomfortable saying that. So here's what I say. When someone wants to schedule an important meeting with me and it's family time, I say, "You know what? I can't do it. I can't schedule the meeting because I have a very important issue to deal with at that time. I have a very important meeting. And you know what? It is important. It is a very important meeting." So, there are ways around. But the thing is to be creative, to talk with your children and respect them and fill them in. They have very creative ideas on how to manage time.
Right. So great. Thank you so much, Liat. And, I forgot to wish you all a happy Women's Day. I thought of it like in the beginning, but I thought, better late than never. So happy Women's Day to everyone. And, before we get the German perspective from Daja, we would like to get some inputs from Samar as well, about her experience in, managing the work life as a woman in legal industry.
Sure, thanks, Azam. So I'm actually going to speak a bit about my personal relationship with feminism because it has informed my ideas about women in the legal world. It's going to take me a little bit of time to get to how it's done so stick with me. So although I'm based in London, I practice immigration and global mobility law from London. I grew up in Washington, D.C. And although DC is quite liberal relative to other places in the States, you know, I'm old enough that feminist was a bit of a bad word when I was growing up. And I remember when I learned the actual definition of a feminist, which is just somebody who thinks that men and women are equal. And it was such sophisticated, adult, grown-up knowledge for me. Although I didn't implement that knowledge in the most sophisticated way, because I would then just chase people around the playground and say, are you a feminist? Are you a feminist? And they say, no, 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 I'm not a feminist. And I'd say, oh, well, you know, it just means that you think men and women are equal. That's my first memory of kind of engaging with feminism. And it did stick with me, but I don't think I really gained a proper understanding until my years at university, when I was lucky enough to study the writings of Simone de Beauvoir in French. Now, a funny story about her book, The Second Sex, is that the rights to the English translation for a long time were owned by a publishing house that published kind of, you know, light romances, you know, like racy stories. And the way that came about was that the owner of the publishing house, who was American, had this wife who went to Paris on a shopping trip. And she saw in everybody's pocket Simone de Beauvoir's book, which is called The Second Sex. So in French, Le Deuxième Sexe. And so she just saw this book that everybody was reading, everybody, you know, had, that had the word sex in it. And so she went home and told her husband, oh, you have to buy the rights to this book. Everybody in Paris is reading it. Buy the rights to the translation. So he did, and he had, you know, a racy novel translated, but it's a very dense philosophical work. And so the English translation for years was not very good because all the rights were owned by this one publisher. It's a tragic irony in the history of feminism. And only within the last 10 years or so has it been properly translated. But I was lucky enough that I was able to study it in French at the time. And one of the most important chapters, and one that I would encourage people to read if they have the time, is the one on history. Now, I think that a lot of people's approach to the income gap and you know, discrimination against women is there's a kind of helplessness to it, because nobody understands, you know, oh, why is it? How did we get here? You know, it's so obvious from an ethical, moral, logical standpoint that women are equal. So why are we treated so unequally? And I found that Simone de Beauvoir's explanation of history was very useful. And I'll paraphrase it badly for you here. It's basically that in the Stone Age, men didn't really understand, or humans didn't really understand reproduction and creation. So women were seen to have this kind of secret power, this secret power and link to nature. And then when the agricultural revolution happened, men assumed that creative power and wrested the creative power from women. And in the ideologies, in the kind of religious systems, there then became this antagonism between the female goddess and the male god, where the male creator god then wrested power from the female gods, and then the male god became the primary god. In that battle, because it was adversarial, women take on characteristics of evil, weak, you know, all the negative characteristics that stay with us today, actually. Because quite unfortunately, soon after those developments, humans started writing everything down. And so it institutionalized those dynamics. And those are the same dynamics that we come up against now. So that's a very bad paraphrasing of Simone de Beauvoir. And her take on it is that women have to assume power kind of within the male framework, right? So when the agricultural revolution happened, people stopped being nomadic, they settled down, started raising animals, and that's when private property came into play, basically. And that's also when the sexual control of women through marriage came into play, because there's an assumption on Simone de Beauvoir's part that we all want to surpass our own lifetimes. We want to surpass our own mortalities. Well, how does a man do that? He passes the private property that he's accumulated onto his children. How does he know who his children are? He controls a woman sexually. And that's where marriage and all the restrictions around women's sexuality come in. Now Simone de Beauvoir kind of assumes that women have to operate within this private property framework, which is obviously, the basis of the capitalist system that we're living in now. And theoretically, I actually don't agree with her. I think that there is an opportunity, for a different type of system. Okay, I swear I'm getting to the women in the legal world bit now.
You have all the right to do that. Today is your day.
But I think that we do also have to take a pragmatic approach. And so I've been thinking about my own experience in the legal world. For a long time, I was an employee at a firm, wasn't properly recognized for what I was doing. In fact, I will say a man was taking credit for a lot of my work. Since I moved to my current firm, which is, let's see if I can do this, Spencer West, I'm in a firm with a fee sharing model. So in fact, we're all self-employed. And I think that this is a unique opportunity for women to benefit from the fruits of their labor within the legal world, to be self-employed, either within a fee sharing firm or setting up on your own, which, in the gig economy now is much more common for people to have small businesses of their own. I think that the traditional law firm model is less agile, maybe less able to deal with all of the seismic changes, socioeconomic changes that we're going through today. And so I think that there's this opportunity for women to have more control over their own legal practice through these alternative business models in the law.
All right, great. Thank you so much. I have a question for you. Maybe I'll come back later. First, let's get the input from Daja and then see what's her German perspective around this women in legal industry.
Yeah, thank you, Azam. Warm welcome also from Munich, from Germany, to everybody who joined. I see many different names on the screen, so that's great because it's a very, very diverse group, and I love it already. So yeah, so I'm a litigator actually at Reed Smith in Munich. I'm a mom of 2 children, so I'm 40 and my children are 7 and 10. And I'm a partner with Reed Smith. So that's my background. And just building maybe on what Liat and Samar said, I think, yeah, it's still a tough job to do. I'm working full time. My husband is also a lawyer, like Liat's husband as well. So loads to do. And I definitely share that you should not be guilty. And please assign all the tasks you do not have to do to other people, and don't feel guilty about it. This is about school, childcare, but also all the housework. I definitely have assigned everything which is not super important for building a relationship and having a relationship with my children, and also my husband, which is also, I think, something you should not neglect, that you still have a relationship with him as well, and you should build on and have to spend time with him on a regular basis. So beyond that, I think you really need to love what you do. Otherwise, you will not have the motivation to really put a lot of effort and time into your job. I was like quite a professional tennis player when I was younger, and I always compare this with a tennis match. So you have a career and it's up and down, and you have good times and you have bad times or not that great times, and you have to keep going. And you have to motivate yourself to move on and stay on track. And then I think you have to stay yourself, be authentic, but with skill. So there is a great article in Harvard Review about being authentic, but with skill. And you have still to develop yourself. And I think working with a coach is something which is very crucial, because you have someone being not your friend, not your partner, being very neutral and tells you things you don't want to hear, but which are very, very important for you to progress on a personal basis, which is super important to be a leader at some point. So that's something. And then moving forward, I think women are always shy to speak up about what they want, whether it's about compensation, but also about a career. When I speak with my younger colleagues here in the firm, they are like reluctant to say what they want. And also it's like, Daja, I don't think that I will have a legal career here, because I think I want to have children and spend more time with my family. This is also something you should speak about, because then you can make your choices. And I would always encourage ladies, also men, to just think about what you want and then share this with the important people at your business, speak with your family, your partner, whatever you have, and find a way how to progress there. And then one thing I think is really important is your network, because it's always said, at least in Germany, that women have to work much harder than men to get to the same position. I don't really fully agree, because I think just working hard doesn't make you progress on the ladder at all, because you need to know the right people in your network, and they need to mentor you, definitely, but they need to support you when it comes up to promotion. And they need to stand up and say, look, she, her, whatever needs to progress. And that is something I think men are much, much better at, to build the network, to go for lunch, to go and have drinks. And we are often reluctant and say, okay, we need to stay at our desk to do the work. No, I think that's not right. You need to go out and speak to have a conversation with the relevant people at your company. I think that's about it to start with.
Great. So thank you so much, Daja. So I would have one more question to you as well. Maybe I'll come back later. I'll go back to Samar. Samar, you said that there is, you work in some fee sharing model. So I'm just trying to understand, how does it make a difference being a woman, to work on a fee sharing model? So is there a difference in fee for men and women, when you work in a fee sharing model? How does it work, when you take up those kind of projects?
Yeah, so the advantage is basically that you're self-employed under the umbrella of the firm. So all of the work that you do, you do pay a percentage to the firm in a similar way to the way barristers work in the UK, where you pay a percentage to the chambers, and then they provide things like office space, website, branding, all those kind of infrastructure elements. Everybody pays the same fees to the firm, men and women, and it relates to the amount of your billing, okay? So this is better than the situation in most law firms, where even though there's a higher percentage of women working in the firm, there's a very low percentage of equity partners. So I think there are more, in the UK, there are more women solicitors than men, but women make up only 20% of equity partners in law firms. So this model, the fee sharing model, offers a structure wherein women will benefit more directly. And there's also none of the hierarchical, credit stealing, basically. So in a traditional law firm, there's a very hierarchical structure, with different levels of seniority. And because so many of the equity partners are men, then really they're benefiting from everybody else's work in a way that doesn't happen as much in the fee sharing model. As a lawyer with my own practice within the firm, I now have my own employee, so it's not completely flat in that way, but you do need support. You do need people in a law firm doing things at different levels. So it's not that that doesn't exist at all, but it is very different and much more beneficial to women. And I think the same would apply if you were to open a small firm of your own. Basically you're the boss. There's nobody there to take credit for your work, as so often happens. And Daja spoke about women just feeling they need to sit at their desk and do all the work and do it perfectly, and then they get this assessment where often the often male partner will say, yeah, okay, good job. And absolutely, I completely agree that is not going to advance your career nearly as much as joining a LinkedIn group of women lawyers, joining networking groups in your industry, making those connections, making connections within your organization for sure, because that will build the recognition and the support that you need to advance.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing this perspective. So I know our audience might also have some questions, right? So what I request to my audience is maybe they can ask their questions in the chat section, and I'll take up those questions for the panelists, right? So Daja, as I said, I'll come back to you with another question. So I have one for you. So, as you work in the litigation, the commercial and in the estate, so how difficult it is to be a woman in a court? How does it feel like to be in the court? Yeah, please share the experience in that sense.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to. As you can imagine, often in a courtroom, there are not that many female lawyers or judges. So I just had an experience 2 weeks ago. We were 14 people, and I was the only woman. So I do not feel awkward about it anymore. But when I grew up and got more senior, there is some point where you have the responsibility for your client to be the lawyer in front of the judge, and you are the only woman in the room. And this feels strange, and you have to find your way how to get a voice, how to be heard, how not to be interrupted, which is very, very often the case, I experience at least. So I think, be confident, try to be confident. And what I think the first thing is dress properly. As a woman, it's definitely nice to wear dresses. I love to wear dresses, to be honest. But maybe in a courtroom, it's not, if you're in particular a younger female lawyer, not the greatest way to wear a short skirt and red skirt or something. So try to be as formal as possible. And then, you have to just develop your skills to speak up and to speak properly, which you can also rehearse, and try to be just confident. I think confidence is really the thing you need to have, but it's not easy to build, in particular if you have many white old gray men, as you call them, who do not take you seriously. And I definitely had the experience when I was in a courtroom or also in a meeting. I think that's what everybody else experiences, being like the only one woman in a meeting, not being heard, being interrupted, and not being regarded as a real, proper attendee of the meeting. And I think you just have to do it over and over again to get just the skills you need.
All right, great. Yeah, great to know about these courtroom perspectives about women in the litigation industry. All right, so Liat, I have these similar questions to you, similar to these Shams, Ms. Shams. So, as you know that Samar is working into a partnership model wherein the fee sharing is in place. So, is it also there in the IP industry? Is it, you've experienced that thing in Israel, or maybe you've seen that somewhere else? Does that work in the IP industry compared with that?
Yes, actually it does. In Israel, it is often, it's common to give an attorney who transfers a file about 30%, 25 to 30% of what you make. So we have a lot of attorneys in Israel doing almost nothing, being basically a salesperson and making a profit and making a living pretty well. So, and it's a win-win situation, because if you get a good client, a good file, so maybe you get a little bit less on your first file, but then after that, the more cases come in. So I have a lot of cooperations with many legal firms in Israel. And I give the percentage, and sometimes I get the percentage, and it's very good. And for women, it's also very good, because you have to work less hours sometimes when you work with this model. It's very flexible. The IP world I think it's a bit more flexible than, for example, litigation. Litigation is also flexible, right? You can choose to be with your kids in the afternoon and then stay up all night preparing for your big case in court the next day. So you can prioritize your hours. It's not like if you have a shop and you need to open 9 to 5. So you have to be there all the time. It's different for lawyers, but in the IP, it's even more flexible, because you have deadlines and you know them up front. And so you can file a patent application at 11 p.m. It doesn't matter to the client if you filed it at 7 p.m. or at 11 p.m. It doesn't matter. So you're even more flexible when it comes to IP. And in IP, most of your deadlines in advance. And when your colleagues send instructions, they won't send it one day before, usually, right? Usually they'll give you some time to prepare. So you can prioritize your time, you can have your schedule up in advance, and you can provide the right expectations to your family, to your colleagues, to your clients, if you need to reschedule things, and to your kids. You can have everybody expect when you'll give them the file, when you'll give them the material, when you'll file your patent application. It's all about expectations when it comes to it, I think. Because if your husband knows that you're not going to be the whole week at home because you have a big case, then he'll understand if you tell them in advance. Same with your children, same with your clients, right? If you say to a client, I'll send you an agreement the next day, and you don't, it's really bad. But if you say, you know what, I have a very busy week, so you'll get your agreement, but you'll get your contract at the end of the week. Okay, so it's all about expectations. Once you put them right, people are more understanding to your schedule. And I think it comes down to it at the end of the day.
All right.
Explaining yourself.
Yeah. Right. Great. So, Samar, I have another question for you. So it's like, you've been working in this immigration industry, and then you've been helping a lot of workforce. So where do you see, the women in placing back into the high-paying jobs, or maybe the jobs which are available to the high-skilled workers? So what kind of people you majorly transfer from one country to another?
So I work with a lot of different industries, a lot of tech companies, but also everything from hospitality to construction. And because of Brexit, really, the skill level for sponsoring people to work in the UK has dropped, so that it's now at medium skill level, which is considered the equivalent of high school, roles which require high school levels of skill. I would say that for women in the future, a major hurdle that we need to address is re-entry to the legal workforce after having children. that is when we lose a lot of excellent women lawyers. They just don't come back, and then they lose confidence, and then they end up never coming back. Meanwhile, they've studied so hard, they've worked so hard, and then it's kind of all out the window. You know, they won't even be accumulating pension anymore. They can end up in a very bad situation. So I think that we would do well to address that as much as possible. And there are different ways to do it. You know, there are mentorship programs specifically to address that situation. I've worked with one before called Leaders Plus. There's the wonderfully named Pregnant Then Screwed organization as well. So there are a lot of opportunities to get involved in addressing that. I think one thing that's interesting to me is the effects of shared parental leave. So I really had high hopes for shared parental leave of kind of facilitating more equality at work, and it hasn't translated. I saw a post on LinkedIn from a lady based in Germany who was saying that, you know, the income gap there is still quite bad, which I found particularly depressing because Germany has had shared parental leave much longer than the UK has had. And so it kind of gives us an idea of what the longer term effects might be. And it seems that they're maybe not necessarily that beneficial. I don't have the answers, but that's something that I'd like to look at a little bit more, because I was hoping that that would be, you know, that would have a significant effect, but it seems like maybe it hasn't, or there may be other factors that are diminishing it.
All right, great. So, Daja, you know, as we all know that you are the Munich chair of Reed Smith's Women Initiative Network. So can you talk a little about, you know, what is the Women Initiative Network at Reed Smith? You know, we'd like to know more about it and how does it work?
Yeah, happy to. So it's a global network in general. We have a global chair and a vice chair, and then we have, like, in every office worldwide, another office chair. So I'm the office chair for Munich. And what we try to do is definitely support our younger associates, female associates, but also male associates coming to parental leave in a minute, to support them with handling their career, knowing whether they want a career, how they would like to balance it with potential family life or also with their normal life in general. So, I mean, Generation Y and Z don't really, or many of them don't want to invest that much time into working hours than maybe we do and did when we were younger. And so that's definitely something, so a mentorship and support, and we try to support them. And then we have try to build networking events. So we will have like a Reed Smith Munich event later today, inviting clients and contacts, having also panel discussions with a pro bono organization who's supporting women in Africa, and try also to motivate the younger colleagues to build a network, both internally, but also externally. And then definitely one big part is how to support associates being promoted to partnership. That is something we definitely have to support, how they get visible, what they need to be promoted, both from a business perspective, but also from a personal perspective, from character-wise, personality. And then when they get pregnant and go on maternity leave, how to support them during maternity leave, invite them still to events, that they stay connected with the firm and their colleagues and also clients, and to motivate them to have parental leave, like to share parental leave with their husbands or partners, which is, I fully agree with you, Samar. It's like the German government supports parental leave, like from a money perspective, both for women and also for men, for up to 14 months. So you do not get your full salary paid, but at least some money, which I think is quite a good thing to do. But we have many fathers still being reluctant to take parental leave because they think that they will not foster their career if they take a leave of, I don't know, 2 months, 4 months, 6 months. And it's changing slowly. When my husband took parental leave like 10 years ago, when we had our first child, everybody looked at him like saying, "Are you crazy? How could you dare to just take parental leave?" And now it's getting better and better. But this is something also to support like men and women in our firm to have the discussion with their partner, what to do about it. And I think this is very, very important because, as you said, Samar, we are losing so many women after they gave birth to their first or even second child. I think second child is even getting worse, or third child even. So that's what we try to do. And it's not working perfectly well, definitely not, but at least it's someone, I'm here to support them, and we try to be just a group and go out for dinner once a month in general. Before COVID, now restarting, just trying to have, just build relationships internally.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Before I ask Liat you a question about the high-tech industry in Israel, I have a common question for all of my panelists. So, see, we've been talking about the women, we're trying to understand their perspective. So I'm just trying to understand, what is the perspective about the LGBT community in the legal industry? I know it's a little different than the women as a whole in the legal industry, but if you have some idea about that, how people are supporting that, how this is evolving, how much percentage these kind of community have these days. Anyone would like to take this up? Okay, so looks like I'm more keen into understanding that. Yeah. Nevertheless, okay, let's shift to the question to Liat, which I have planned. So what is the high-tech industry in Israel as of now, and then how it collaborates with the legal industry in Israel?
Right. So Israel, as you know, is the startup nation, right? So we have a lot of startups here, and the high-tech industry is very blooming in Israel. And this is a great example of how you can have women working for you and promoting women, because the high-tech industry in Israel include a lot of women, and they do give birth and they do raise children. And even such, they do work and get promoted. And it's a great example, maybe for other industries like the legal industry, of how creative you can be when you do want to promote women. For example, in many high-tech companies in Israel, you have a nanny and you have a kindergarten inside the workplace, and you have a gym and you have yoga, and you can come and go as you please. And as long as you do the work and they give you upfront what you need to do, as long as you do it, you can come and go. And it's a great example of how we can be creative, and allow women to work on their own terms, prioritizing their time. I've heard now in the news about a week ago of a company in Israel, startup company in Israel, which said, we don't limit the days that an employee can have vacations. Okay, vacation days. You can go on vacation as long as you want, how many days as you want, as you please. And at first, people thought, oh, that's crazy. They're not going to come to work. They came more to work, more days. They worked harder. So if you give people the freedom to choose, and you'll be surprised on how much they'll want to work harder. And many women, they're multitaskers. Okay, they can hold their baby in the arm and speak on the phone and answer an email, and they can do it all at once. So we just have to give them the opportunity to manage their time. And the startup industry in Israel is a great example of it, because they want the women working there, so the COVID situation made it even more flexible, right? So A woman giving birth could work from home, could have Zoom meetings, okay, in a startup company. And we should all take example, I think, from this industry, also to the legal industry. And we can help women work after they give birth, because I've heard what they talk about of losing great women after birth, and I totally agree with it. So if we can provide these type of services to women in a workplace, would be surprised. A lot of women want to come back. They want to come back. They want to work, and they just need the proper facilities and the proper working terms for that.
All right, great. So now we have a question from the audience. So that's probably directed toward the British law firms. It says that despite vocal support for diversity among law firms, just 17% of British law firms partners are women. So what more initiative or step we can take to reach at least 50%? That's a pretty much the valid question, that how do we reach that?
So I think, again, it goes back to a large extent to institutionalizing support for women returning from maternity leave in a very conscious way, and really devoting some resources to that. So, how is the firm engaging with them whilst they're on maternity leave? And what are they doing to support them when they come back? Often there's very little specialized support for people returning from maternity leave. So that's definitely one thing we can do. I think examining the hierarchical structures more generally would be beneficial. So, there are a number of different management styles that an organization can choose to implement, including more self-management type styles. So I think that if law firms move away from the top-down structures and more towards flat management structures, that would be beneficial. So those are just a couple of ideas I have, in addition to the mentoring organizations that I mentioned earlier, which are also really valuable.
Great, great. So we have another question from Kinelwi. The question is, for me, taking parental leave and seeing how it was negatively viewed by the firm was the catalyst for me taking the plunge to set up my own practice with another female associate. We still have a lot of work to do in this area, as we lose many brilliant and talented litigators once they start having children. That's a pretty legitimate reason to start their own firm. So how do you see the panelists about this one?
I think it's up to us as employers to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
We employ women and men, and it's mainly up to them, because an employee doesn't have a lot to do. That's his workplace. He doesn't have a say about it. But as employers, we have the responsibility to allow women to come back to work after maternity leave, to provide them with the right working terms, working hours, facilities, working from home, flat fees, like Samar said, and so on. This is a social responsibility.
Right. I've seen, the governments also take pretty good initiative in ensuring these kind of things. Like, for example, in India, so the government has made a rule, the maternity leaves would be of 6 months. So once you get pregnant, and then if you feel like you need to go on leave, so you can take up to 6 months leave from the company, and the company will pay full salary to the employee. They cannot just leave it. And that's pretty much, for up to 2 children, people cannot have babies again and again to go for 6-month leave. So that's the cap the government has put on it. So you're right that, this should go, from the employer side, but, at some point the government and the authorities can also place some kind of restrictions and then plan the thing so that everybody feels like in a win-win situation. All right, so we still have 10 minutes and we have probably one more question. So the question is, do you think the current feminist revolts fulfill their advocacy role on women's rights and social awareness?
So I think that they do, in the sense that they've generated a lot of conversation, which is a prerequisite to anything happening. I don't think that a movement in that sense is going to lead to a lot of kind of practical changes, like changes to legislation, etc., sufficiently to kind of fill the void, to fill the gap, for example. But I do think that they have been beneficial in raising awareness, certainly in terms of, for example, in the UK, the statistics relating to the number of rapes that are prosecuted being very, very low. And that's even, when you start, it's something like 1%. And when you start to think about that in terms of how many are actually even ever reported to the police, then, you start to understand the extent of the issue. I'd like to take an opportunity, if that's all right, to just raise a point about creativity. So Liat made a great point about giving people freedom, and something that a lot of organizations are doing more and more is to afford their employees time to just be creative. And it's been found to be extremely productive. So an organization might have, one afternoon per week or one day per week when employees can just do whatever they want. They might set some, rules about the type of thing you should be working on, but it's found to generate great ideas and products for organizations. And I think that this is actually crucial to women in work, to take control of their creativity. So just to refer back to the feminist framework, the male god assumed the creative powers. And so now there's the idea in society that it's men who are creative. You think of the great male artists, Picasso and Matisse, who are indeed great artists, but there's very much this idea, this romantic idea of men as the artistic creators. And I think a very powerful tool for everybody, and one that will benefit women hugely in evening out gaps, would be to assume control of their creativity more.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so one common question last we've got is like, can you share 5 pieces of advice for women lawyers?
Get rid of the guilt.
Yeah.
I start with 1 or 2 maybe. Be authentic with skill and speak up for what you want. So I had 2, but I let the others finish.
Liat.
No, that's okay. I just had say goodbye to the guilt, prepare ahead, and it's all about expectations at the end of the day. Prepare smart.
Great. I hope people are loving this discussion. So I have one last question for all of you. It's like, there are different divisions in the legal itself, like some is IP, litigation, immigration, real estate, in life science, healthcare, and all. So where do you see that, the women percentage is like most into that industry, maybe like IP or real estate or entertainment, where the women are actually focusing on in the legal industry?
I can just share one recent experience I had yesterday. I needed to draft a pitch document for some finance work we have been asked to do for a client. And I realized that in Germany, we have only male finance lawyers.
Wow.
And that made me really mad because they had one female in their group and she just left 2 months ago. But now they are just blokes in that finance group. That's not a pitch document I can hand over to the client. It's not diverse at all. So maybe, I don't know whether that is like for every law firm, but finance seems to be, at least in our law firm, quite a male-dominated area.
Yeah, you must get more women in the finance department in yours. You'll have a good chance. Yeah, that's pretty much there. All right. So, any other question? Maybe like, if you have some cross questions with each other, one last chance for you as well and in the audience as well. So otherwise, I'll have another question for myself. We can just think about it.
I have something to say, which relates to what you said earlier about authorities and governmental support. I think one of the mistakes that governments and authorities make a lot of times is they give a lot of rights to women after birth, maternity leaves, and so on. But the burden often falls on the employer. Now, an employer, he can be a great person, a very good person, but at the end of the day, it's a business. So if he has a woman working for him, which goes on maternity leave every few years for 6 months, that's a pretty big burden. It's not just finance, it's not just about the money, it's about getting someone to do her job for 6 months and have someone qualified to do the job. And in IP, for example, it takes months to get someone to understand how to do the job. So that's a big problem. And I think authorities, if they want employers to have more women working for them, they need to give also support to the employers, to the organizations, not just for giving more legal rights to the women for maternity leave. At the end of the day, it's a business. An employer he makes his own, decisions, business decisions, and one of them is money. And if he has an employer going away, disappearing for 6 months, every few years, that's a problem. And he also has to pay for it and get for her and get someone else. It's a problem. We need to support the employers, I think. I think that's a very good perspective that some authorities are a bit missing.
Yeah, I mean, very valid point. I personally feel that, 3 months maternity leave is sufficient. And 6 months, once the authorities implemented, the government implemented, they go into the political side of it. Like, you imagine the women know that there is a 6-month maternity leave. Now the government retracts that rule, like to make it like 3 months, and they will feel like the women are against to vote them now. So they hesitate in changing this kind of rules once they are in place. And then this becomes problematic for the businessmen, as you rightly pointed out. So I guess we are almost done with our time. We're left with 2 minutes. And I would take this opportunity in the last 2 minutes to thank all of my panelists, Daja, Samar, and Liat. We had some detailed discussion into the women in the legal industry. And I thank you, and I appreciate you taking out time from your busy schedule. You all are busy women lawyers, the successful ones. Those will help. Those are helping other people as well. So I thank you so much, and I thank my team members and all the audience who have been watching it from around the world. We'll be sharing with everyone, and we have our conference. The next one is in Amsterdam. That's on June 29 and 30th. That's our 12th conference. And I invite you all as well as the audience to the conference. And I hope we see you all there. Till then, take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.